So considering you just did this over a long period of time, can you sum up exactly as a review,
Sure.
Basically a repetition of what you've done, what you found and why it changes
Yeah,
history?
I know, because it's like someone's going to have to listen to 5 hours, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just that. It's that there's long explanations of different mazes and rabbit holes along the way. So I just want to
let me give like a 5-minute summary.
Please.
So
you have the floor.
I became somewhat of an expert, I guess, studying the ancient Sumerian tablets, Akkadian and Babylonian tablets. And in that, I ended up realizing and understanding that a lot of what used to be mythical cities in there that were not supposed to really be as old as they say or whatever were real. And then they were finding evidence of catastrophic events that had occurred there, right? And that allowed me to start piecing putting these pieces together and then create a timeline in which I then got stuck because I couldn't figure out how anything left Sumer. Because there was such an incredible event that occurred, again, that destruction, that all of a sudden there was like a gap between it. And all I had was a legend of Etana with Kish, with this reemergence of the new world, but it didn't explain any of the megaliths anywhere. It didn't explain any of those other things anywhere. And so I was like, it was difficult. I was trying to figure it out. And again, these new discoveries in Eastern Turkey, what happened was these brand new 5 to 9 year discoveries in Eastern Turkey are uncovering the remnants of what looks like a completely unknown previous civilization on Earth. And it's being credited right now falsely to the Eurasian civilization that's very similar to like the Hittites, which is just a later group that came thousands of years later. And what we're finding is that there's a direct connection between the ancient tablets of what happened to the Sumerian kings and how they really did land on Mount Ararat, and how there really was like a sacred bloodline that traversed and then basically emerged the civilizations of Lake Von, the Ararat civilizations, which at that point, a new chapter of human civilization seems to have started. And what I mean by that is sophistication seems to have come out of nowhere. And it started at Lake Von, though. And then those giant megaliths and precision seemed to spread all over the world and created the Great Pyramids of Giza, and then eventually gave rise to the ancient Athenian civilization that predated the Greeks, and then the Atlantean civilization out in the Atlantic. And that entire story seems to be interconnected by both new archaeological sites, DNA testing, as well as these ancient bloodlines that we're studying.
Amazing stuff, man. Amazing stuff. I mean, it's so cool to me that people, you can get really interested in something as you did. I mean, you were interested in this for a long time, but you really got into it like 10 years ago, and you just kind of keep going down, using all the public resources available, connecting with people in the space as well to get more voices and information. And then eventually you're able to land on the right thing and track down something that, again, like when I look at stuff like this, it's like, even if you're 30% right about stuff, this is huge. I mean, there's a lot, right. There's a lot there. And like people like to talk about like in an urban mythological type way about El Dorado or Atlantis or something, but these are potentially insanely advanced civilizations that have existed in places that we can see right now that we have no concept of in this world, where we've made all this innovation and all these things that are supposed to be able to help us look back in time, and yet we seem to just take the one definition of things and look back only a certain way. It's an amazing thing, man.
Yeah, and I feel very lucky to have this in my lap, and I want to do justice and be respectful of their story, our story. I want to tell it in the way that's try not to be biased or trying to inject my own things into it. I think that the ancient people were incredible, and I think that if anything, we're trying to get back to them, not the other way around. And the way that I look at this is, look, these discoveries in Eastern Turkey around Lake Von are so new that it's almost hard to wrap our heads around how new they are, because we haven't had anything new like that found in a long time. And they're, again, 5 to 9 years old. And those archaeologists, thank you, Istanbul University, all those people. Yeah, you guys may not know what you're doing, but you are uncovering the missing link of history, if anybody from that listens to this. And I want to say that I'm in talks about creating a mini-doc series or something with this, and I'm looking for funding and potential avenues to be on the first plane to Eastern Turkey. To Lake Von.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I think you have to get out there.
I need to get out to there, and I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I need to. It's time. I feel like this is like the missing piece of our entire story that we've been trying to figure out. And I think that this understanding that comes out of this will forever change both our understanding of our past and who we really are in the future.
It's heavy shit, man. It's really fucking heavy. But, you know, I've waited on, you know, I wanted you to be able to go through this and land it all day because we're on the second podcast now, obviously, and you've been going through all the context of everything. But along the way, as I've hinted when it's happened a few times, you know, you've been going through the things that tie back to like pyramids.
Okay, you want to talk about pyramids again, yeah.
And stuff like that. So I haven't really stopped you from going off and going on to that all the way. But the pyramids are something that, you know, I feel like the internet is so informed on at this point, and it's a mystery to me that I didn't get interested. I mean, I didn't get interested in a lot of this stuff until maybe like a year or two ago, in a lot of ways. So I still feel like such a novice new student to it. But you know, we were looking at the Cuban ruins underwater earlier. That clearly have pyramid. I guess like elements there at the very least.
They've been called by the geologists and others. It's impossible to be natural.
Right. So we've looked at that. Some things maybe we haven't talked as much about today is the evidence of that in South America as well. We know about the most famous ones in Egypt. There are other structures around the world that people have tied back to pyramids or similar technology, if you will, in air quotes there. But when we're looking at Egypt, the base question, just starting there, that I'd love to know, and you started to go towards this earlier, but I don't think you got all the way there, is who do you think built it? And you had been talking about like the ways they built it a little bit and how impressive it was to get some rocks potentially from 1,000 miles away. But what do you know about that? And also if you can relate it to other research like what Ben Van Kerwick has done, or even like Graham and Randall, like what seems to be the possibility there?
So the academic world in terms of the doctrine of history is so stubborn and so incredibly controlled that even with the revelations that the amazing Robert Schoch did, which, by the way, if anything, I feel like Robert Schoch and Duvall are actually the true pioneers, because what they did is the Graham Hancock and Randall Carlsons came right after them, because what Robert Schoch did is that he was brought there from Robert Duvall. I don't know if you know this story.
No,
Robert Duvall was him and John Anthony West were the first two. They were the pioneers of all this. If you want to know how this whole alternative history, lost civilizations, you want to know where it started? It started with them, and I want to give them credit for that, because I think sometimes it gets lost, because John Anthony West, what a hero he was. He's passed away now, but he was a great, great man, and what he was a genius. He was dating the Sphinx and the enclosure and the pyramids of Egypt so far back that even the dating that Graham Hancock and Randall are arguing wasn't even far back enough. And the reason I say that is because there's a term in ancient Egypt called Zep-Tepi. It's written in a lot of the ancient walls throughout the Giza Plateau, and it talks about this time, the first time. It talks about when Egypt started, and its name used to be Kem or Kemet with a K. It was a land of Kem. And it's really kind of weird that you pointed out that Shem sounds just like Kem.
Yeah.
Like just like it, right?
Very similar.
It's almost the exact same.
Yeah.
Shem, Kem. And this has shown us, it's telling us that, look, this was one of the bloodline sons of Ziusudra. They were like superhuman, basically, and they created the Great Pyramids of Giza. Now, I want to get back again to what I was saying. So Robert Duvall and John Anthony West, they're in Giza, and this is what, like 1988, 1991, or some, I don't know. I might not get that date exactly right. But they're there before anybody is talking about this. And they're looking at the Sphinx enclosure, and they're realizing that, look, this is not caused by wind erosion. This is caused by weather erosion, 100%, like clearly. And they're aligning the king and queen's chamber in the Great Pyramid to star constellations of Sirius and Orion's belt. And they're realizing, hey, these don't line up. These don't line up 4,000 or 5,000 years ago at all. And then they're like, well, we don't have any pharaohs ever buried in them. We know they're not tombs. In fact, the entire story about Khufu may have been a complete fabrication. There's strong evidence, and I don't remember the gentleman's name off my head. There's strong evidence of the person who discovered that name written fabricated it himself. That there's never a name ever of Khufu anywhere in the Great Pyramid at all. And to this day, we find it only in one place. So weird, right?
Yes.
Because Khufu had nothing to do with it. In fact, the pyramids were likely built 10,000 years or more before Khufu. So, this is how the story went for a little history lesson on people. Jonathan West and Robert Duvall, they contact an awesome geologist who they're friends with named Robert Schoch. And Robert Schoch is a trained geologist. And at first, he was apprehensive of the whole concept they were trying to push for, which is like exactly what you want. You want to have a scientist who isn't biased on any kind of an answer and is there to just look at the evidence. And that's what he did. They flew him out to Giza. Robert Duvall walked up, and he's like literally one of the best geologists in the world. He walks up to the walls, and he looks at it, and he's like, that's not wind erosion. Boom. And he then sat down, and I think he had to try to wrap his head around changing the paradigm, because I don't think at that point he had thought that was going to be what he expected, as far as I know of Robert Schoch's story, and I love that man very much. But then he proposed it, and you think Graham Hancock got lambasted?
Oh, yeah. That's
Robert Schoch was a full-on academic who's got multiple degrees, and he was a very well-trained geologist, and he got completely destroyed. He proposed that the Sphinx enclosure was water and not wind, and because there hasn't been enough water on the Giza Plateau until at least 12,000 years ago, all of a sudden we got a problem. Okay? And so that's how the whole thing started. Meanwhile, Graham Hancock goes to Ethiopia, and he's as part of a journalism exploit, and he finds out that, shoot, they supposedly had the Ark of the Covenant here? And so it's interesting how these men got started and how all this whole thing has started, but that's how it all started. For a little history lesson, if everybody forgot. And then those very brave men, all of them, Robert Schoch, Robert Duvall, John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and there's definitely a couple I'm missing. They spearheaded this entire thing to try to get to the truth of alternative lost civilizations in history. And Jonathan West believed that looking at the alignments of Leo with the Great Sphinx, that he believed that Zeb Tepi was referring to 38,000 years ago. Okay, so we're going to call it 40. So we can just call it 40
Just to stop you for a minute. I hate that it's like even labeled like alternative history or anything. It should be, I'm not going to think of a good name off the top of my head, but like, we are exploring things that we are constantly mounting evidence for. We don't have the hardest evidence to say absolutely this, absolutely that, including anything you've said today. So that just points out half the problem right there. Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.